Hey, my name is Jonathan, and I own a digital marketing company in Florida. I wanted to briefly go over how to choose the right server and what makes the most sense for you and/or your clients. In my case, like I said, I am managing client sites. I'm hosting them, developing them, all that kind of stuff. I've moved around from all kinds of different hosts, everybody from one-in-one to InMotion, GoDaddy. Basically all the options that you could potentially go with, I have spent time on and ultimately ended up with Cloudways, and I've even done migrating back and forth between servers on Cloudways because I've set the expectation with my clients that they're paying for the absolute best service, speed, reliability, all that kind of stuff. And as you can see here, I have two servers at the moment. One I've been messing around with the last day or so, just trying to figure out what exactly it is that I wanted to do. When I first signed up for Cloudways, I started off with a Google Cloud server, and that one was fantastic. The speed and performance was just out of the box fantastic. And Vultr is pretty good too, but the trade-off is that you pay for bandwidth on Google Cloud, whereas it's included in the pricing in Vultr. So if you're budget conscious, something like Vultr or some of the others we'll go over here in just a minute make more sense for you. But to start off with, whenever you sign up for your free trial, which you can do in the description below, there's a link. If you click on that, it'll basically come up to this screen whenever you set up your account. But what happens from there is that you name your managed app and server, which can both be changed later. So we'll just go ahead and do new client and new server to make it really easy. And then from there, the project is a way that you're supposed to be able to sort through your apps and group them together. But really what happens is it's not that much use, because when you try to filter by projects, like if you click up here in the main menu, if you click on projects, they're all still listed together. There's just a little extra line item underneath the app name that shows what project it's in. The best way that I've found is if you go back to the server tab, you can see what apps are on the that server right there, and then you can click and that takes you straight to that application install. So that's way easier than trying to group it by projects, but you can be very thorough if you want to do that. So like I said, as far as the actual server provider, there's a number of different options you can see here. DigitalOcean, I think this is Linode, and then I always call it Vultr. Those three are a flat pricing, so you can see each one of them has a certain degree of resources included, and the price reflects that. They're all pretty straightforward. Each one kind of has their similarities and differences, but overall, the main difference that I found between these is the location options. So Linode has a couple of these, you can see right there. Vultr has a couple more options, depending on where you're at in the US or across the world. And then DigitalOcean has not that many. There's like two. Let's see, how many are in the US? San Francisco, New York. So basically two. You have two options there. And then, similar story with Google Cloud. If you want to try to choose your location, there's only four, but you can rest assured that no matter where you are on Google Cloud, or really any of these, that you're going to have a good experience. So like I said, I've used both Google Cloud and Vultr. I can't speak for really any of the others in terms of their advantages or disadvantages, but I will focus on these two. My recommendation is that if you are budget conscious, if you're concerned about scaling and performance, if you have a sudden traffic spike, because you do pay for bandwidth with Google Cloud. If you're concerned about that kind of thing, then Vultr is the way to go, because you can see on the 4 GB plan, it does include 3 terabytes of bandwidth, among the other stats that you can see there. Whereas with Google Cloud, it shows you this slider here up to 500 gigs, but it does go beyond that. It doesn't cap you. If you use this as an estimator to say, I think I might use 180 gigs of bandwidth, it doesn't stop you at that. This is just purely for estimation's sake. In terms of the Vultr server that I have, those 20-something sites usually use about 100 gigs of bandwidth on a regular month. Can spike up more than that if we do like a big email blast or something like that, and there's good reception. But you can see there that server costs $44 a month. If I were to go to something comparable in Google Cloud, that's basically the next tier up, which is the N1 standard, and just out of the box, not changing any of the disk storage, the database, or the bandwidth, we're at $73 a month. If we take our bandwidth and put that at 100, then we're looking at more like 85. Take your storage up to like 50 gigs, I think is what I had, or 60. If we try to get it as close as we can to that Vultr server, and then database is probably 20 gigs. So realistically, you're going to be paying about double, more than double from Vultr. But the thing is, the performance is just so much better and at least in my experience, that it's worth it. Yes, that is double the cost, but you should be billing your clients, minimum $50 a month for hosting, including backups and security monitoring, SSL certificates, stuff like that. So you should easily be able to cover the cost of a pretty standard server with 1 or 2 clients at the most. If you're not, you need to reevaluate that. And if you're interested in my pricing system, I will be more than happy to make videos on that. As far as Google Cloud goes, let's say, in one standard, I want 100 gigs of bandwidth. We'll do 50 gigs of disk, because I think right now I'm using like 25 or probably even less. And then the database. That, again, is about $100 a month. The bandwidth you can always try to get down by, smushing images. You can configure caching on all of your sites, which you definitely should be doing. And if you're using WordPress, it's pretty easy. You can install some of the performance optimization plugins. There's a number of different ones out there. We won't go into those today. But realistically, for a decent, smaller company, if you're a one-man show managing 10, 20, 30 websites, you should probably you could get away with spending $100, $150 a month on hosting, which in my opinion is not out of the question by any means. As far as the scaling up and down, let's say you start off with a small server and you need to move up. On Google Cloud and AWS, you can always move up and down. So if you decide, man, I need to bump this up because I know I'm going to have some big blast coming in, then you can do that. You can bump that up, and then when the surge is done, you can bring that back down. It's not an automatic process though, so you do have to kind of keep an eye on it, and you can configure the Cloudways bot to send you email notifications for certain thresholds, like CPU usage is below 80% available, then it'll send you an email on that. Or the other option, which I haven't personally used, is this other provider called Kayup, or Yup, however you say that. And you can configure each one of these resources to automatically scale depending on usage. So if you say, I'm going to start off with a 2-core processor and let's say 4 gigs of RAM, then if you have a utilization that exceeds a certain amount for a certain amount of time, then it will scale up to your set limit for however long it needs to. So if you decide, like, I'm willing to pay for up to 16 gigs of RAM and a 4-core processor to try and support that load coming through, the Kayup program and system will basically auto-scale your server, and when it's done, it will auto-scale it back down, which is super cool. In terms of general usage, though, that's probably a pretty rare occasion, so I would just kind of keep in mind that that's not really a reason to choose that particular provider, in my opinion, unless you have really wild variations in traffic, which, as far as standard businesses go, that's normally not the case. And I mentioned vertical scaling up and down on AWS and Google Cloud. Vultr, Linode, and DigitalOcean, my understanding is that once you scale up, you can't go back down without cloning the entire server to a new one, and then basically what you have to do is change DNS on every single application to point to the new IP of the new server. So that's a huge pain. In my case, of those 23 sites that I have, about 15 of them are live. So there'll be 15 different customers I'd have to go log into their DNS and change, and there's a number of other reasons why you wouldn't want to do that, but beyond just the headache of that. So keep that in mind. I would definitely consider going with these two. Again, you do pay more, but you get a lot more out of it. The vertical scaling up and down, the performance is just so much better. It's fantastic. To give you an idea, every single site that I have on WordPress is all optimized as much as it can be in terms of, like I said, smushing and optimizations, caching, that kind of thing. And what I find is that my load times on Google Cloud were somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 500 second server response time, according to Google Cloud Insight, or whatever it's called, Google's Page Speed Insight now. And then on Vultr, still pretty reasonable, but it varies between 700 milliseconds and like 1.2 seconds. So that, in my opinion, is not acceptable. I want it to be as low as it can possibly be. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to be going back to Google Cloud. So I'll return to my server tab real quick and show you what I'm going to do. So I will basically provision this new Google Cloud server, probably on the N1 standard. I don't really care about the bandwidth slider because I kind of have an idea for that. Give myself 50 gigs of storage and probably 15 gigs of database for the moment. And I'm going to put myself in South Carolina because I'm in Florida, and that makes the most sense for us. And then what I'm going to do is slowly over time, one by one, I'm going to take the highest traffic sites off of this main account here and move them to the Google Cloud. There is a really cool function where you can clone an entire server or an entire, one particular app. You can clone them server to server, and that's a pretty cool function. Then what's going to happen is once I get all of the live sites off of this main account here, then moving forward, I'm going to just have this really cheap staging server for sites that are in development that will get almost no traffic except me and my customer looking at it. The reason why I want to do that is just because I want to have a clear separation of live sites and development sites. It's not really necessary, but I don't want to cross over. The other thing is some of my sites as well, I am wanting to do a more kind of professional staging system where I can be setting up a site here, making changes to the site that I can then push live on the Google Cloud server and just use Git or whatever to move them back and forth. So with that in mind, my recommendation is definitely go with Google Cloud if you are prioritizing performance and reliability over cost, and go with Vultr if you are more cost conscious. It's still a great platform. I have no complaints with it, except that the performance is just not good enough for what I've come to expect for myself, as well as what I try to sell to my customers. So hopefully this is helpful. Again, make sure to use the link in the description below. You do get yourself a free trial that's fully functional for, I think it's 3 or 4 days, which isn't a lot, but you can get in there and play around and put some sites on it. So if you guys liked this video, let me know if there's other topics you'd like to cover, and anything that we've talked about I'm willing to make videos on, and I would love to do that. And I will see you guys soon.